All right, thanks everyone for tuning in tonight to the live stream playthrough of my new album, Carrying Your Halo, which is out on New Forces. You can probably see a link above me to go and purchase the album. With me tonight is one of my oldest friends in noise, Matthew Bahnsen. Matt lives in Northeastern Ohio, along with much like I do. And when I was first getting the noise, Matt was kind of someone that showed me the way. To literally sat down and explained to me how to make noise several times. But Matt, thank you so much for joining me tonight and for agreeing to take this journey with me.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for asking me or having me do this. Um, I suppose for the uninitiated to our relationship, maybe we should talk just a little bit about our path together. You know, when we were first talking about doing this, I recalled that I was at your first show,
Yeah.
which was I have to guess it was probably my second or third show in experimental music myself. So we cut our teeth at the exact same time, and
Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
we've played uh, tens of gigs together.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
in different states and stuff too. We've done weekend tours together and have a. I've been trying to figure out how long the group chat's been running, but I'm gonna say
Be
we're
4 years now.
yeah, we have a very intense wrestling noise vegan food group chat that we interact with pretty much daily with Mike Kamade from KBD,
Yep.
who is like an invaluable resource for both of us. I'm
Yeah.
sure you
Yeah.
don't mind me speaking for you saying that. Um, but we're here to talk about the new record, and as somebody who's been I guess with you since the beginning, I have to say this is one of the most focused efforts I've seen you put together.
Thank
There's
you.
like there, and I also know it's probably your most personal record, if I were to guess.
Mhm.
One thing that strikes me as, I guess, interesting about this is that you're a person who's put out releases primarily on your own labels,
Mhm.
to my knowledge, and you've done a lot of your own art too.
Mhm.
And in both cases, a label released this for you. That's not
Mhm.
your label, even though you run a label right now,
Yeah.
and somebody else did the art.
Yes.
So, I guess the first thing I want to ask is, uh, what was the impetus to approach other people to help you with this?
Well, Stefan, who runs New Forces, was one of the earlier uh, supporters of my work. He reached out very early on in my time in noise and wanted to put out a tape, and we've gone on a number of tours now together. I often make the joke that Stefan is like alternate universe me, where I'm financially stable and educated. But he's truly one of my closest friends, and for a while I had talked about wanting to put my last record out, Forever Passing Glory. I'd wanted to do that on vinyl really bad, and at one point I did have a commitment from a label, but unfortunately that label kind of went into the ether like a lot of noise labels
Yeah.
do. And I was able to get a tape release version out via uh, Zen from Cremation Lily's label Strange Rules, and I was very happy with the presentation of the album. And it didn't get any proper, I guess would be the word, like distribution stateside. So there's still a hope maybe one day that will be uh, an LP or something along those lines. But Stefan had, in talking about wanting to do a full length record, he I think he literally texted me like, "Hey, I want to put out a CD. Just give me the enough time recording wise to make that worth the effort.
Right.
I don't want 10 minutes. I don't want 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I want substantial time." So um the process for Plague Mother for the last 5 6 years has been to really slowly piece together the releases. I will have stuff from a few years back that I kind of just set aside, and I say like it doesn't fit this release, or it's not what I want to work on right now, but I have it kind of banked for a particular time. And uh, so once he kind of gave me that impetus to start, I went back and looked at some of those recordings, and um, kind of factored some of those into the mix of what you hear. There's things recorded from, I think, as far back as like 2016, and stuff that was recorded, maybe 2 weeks before I gave him the final unmastered version of the record. But that's how it started for the release itself. Now for the art, um, I've been burned pretty bad on art before.
So have
Uh,
we all.
yeah, yeah. I have a pretty stringent policy of seeing the art before someone releases something now, and it's led to some awkward conversations with some close friends. Because it's like, hey, no, but it's my preference. And with noise being something that's kind of so open to interpretation, someone might see something when they hear my noise, and have nothing to do with my vision of it. And so it's really hard for me to let go and let someone else do the art. But with this record being so different, um, I wanted to kind of find someone who, as a visual artist, express themselves and express the kind of themes and experiences that run through that album. I wanted someone who I felt did that with their art. I wanted someone who was, in my mind, I don't want to say this and like insult her because the comparison, but like, like when I see her art, it's like, oh, that's Plague Mother visually.
Right.
Um, and Alexandra was that person. The moment I saw some of her art, I just felt moved by it. I felt connected to it. And she's done some album art for a lot of other uh, bands. Not really any noise projects to my knowledge. I mean, I guess like Azar Swan. Probably butchered the pronunciation there, but yeah, I just kind of I approached Alexandra, and I told her, or I asked her, I begged her to do the art, because I knew that she had also lost a companion animal in the recent history, and she could kind of identify with that, where that takes you, and just talking to her in our day-to-day life about our experiences with that grief, I knew that she had similar experiences. So I asked her to please just listen to the album. Uh, I shared some writing with her that eventually will be coming out in a zine, sort of, I guess not companion because it's not coming out with it, but a zine to complement the album. And I said, just take this stuff and do what you do for me. Um, and yeah, and that's how the art started for this album.
Oh, okay. So I guess, I have my own answer for this as somebody who makes, I guess, non-traditional music as well, albeit in a different format. How much do you think the visuals associated with an album enforce a narrative on the listener? And in the case of this album, what do you think, I guess, the art contributes to the sonic journey, for lack of a better term?
Sure. I think, particularly with noise, that art does impose a narrative. I mean, when you look at any number of these things behind me, a lot of them don't have even song titles. It's just the name of the project and the name of the record, and then some images. And that's really all you get to go off of, unless you know the person personally and can have a conversation with them, which is why I started a podcast in 2016, is because I wanted to have those conversations that I wasn't going to have just getting a tape in the mail.
Right.
So I do think, especially with noise, it can really impose something. And for me personally, with my material, I find great importance in that. I want the imagery to enforce that narrative and to push that story as you're listening to it. I don't Plague Mother is not meant to just be like close your eyes and listen to. I would prefer if you look at the artwork while you're listening to it.
That's
And
interesting.
and for this piece that Alexandra did, I mean, it's mournful. You know, it's it carries a weight of loss to me, and I think that's exactly what I mean, that is exactly what I wanted. I couldn't believe when she sent the first images of it to me. I could not believe how it felt like I had already had it in my head, even though I know I didn't. It was just like it immediately felt right, and I was just like, yes, thank God that it was, so incredible. I had full faith in her. I wasn't worried that she was gonna like,
Right.
give me like some like shitty collage with a bunch of like naked people and Nazi symbols or whatever. But
Right.
like I saw it and I was like, oh my God, like that's the album artwork. That is it.
Right. Yeah. I always feel like you have like, such a distinct um, idea of what your personal aesthetic is. Uh, you know, down to how you dress, even. I mean that in a flattering way, down to like wearing Hawaiian shirts when you play and stuff, because
Yeah.
that's part of the package. I guess what I'm curious about, aside from these collaborations of somebody else doing the art and somebody else releasing it, in what ways was this a departure or like a growth of your aesthetic?
For Plague Mother in particular, it was a pretty big. I don't. I think only one other time, actually, ironically, on the tape that New Forces put out, I had a track that I collaborated with our friend Sarah Snyder. She provided a lot of the electronics at the time because she was staying with me at the time, and so, um, and actually at that point in time, I was experiencing some a difficult journey that she was witness to just by the fact that she was in the same building as I was, and so I felt really comfortable letting her in on the process. And for Plague Mother, I really don't like to have other people involved. At least in the initial presentation of the material. Now in 2015, when I released Dying Midwestern, I did have friends do remix tracks, and that was a really cool experience because then I got to hear what my friends heard. That's what they picked out of it. That's what they decided to manipulate, and that's what they decided to remix. This album's going to get the remix treatment as well. I already have, I think, about a half a dozen tracks from folks, but um, this is the first record aside from that tape where I've let other people be a part of it, and that wasn't intentional at first. I just happened to, like I said, I have this like bank of recordings that I just haven't fit anywhere. And I went back and I was listening to some of them and I was like, wow, there's like there's a piece here that feels right, that feels like it would work for the album. And um coincidentally, these were people that had shared, if not had shared similar experiences with me, had just kind of lived through my own experience with me. Um, and so, I kind of felt like I could work that material into the presentation. Um, and then, such as in the case with Mike and with Jackson's material, I just I'm not good at not harsh noise. At least like sourcing it. I can put stuff together, but it's really hard for me to get a non-harsh source that I like, without it kind of all sounding sort of the same. Like I can make 1,000 recordings of me walking through a cemetery or whatever, but like for example, like if I wanted some like percussive sounds or anything along those lines, like I'm not going to do it. So then letting, kind of letting those folks in, along the same lines. It's the same as with Wyatt and with Zach. Just saying like, hey, like, can you can I let you can will you be part of this album with me, because I think that, not only sonically will you add something to the record, but you're a person that knows me, you're a person that's seen what I have gone through, and that's what this record's about.
Yeah. You know, I uh, I went through a pretty profound loss myself in 2016. My mother passed away, um, and it's an odd thing to be a fairly young person. I mean, I'm 37, so I'm not as young as I once was, but to be without out one of their or to have had one of their parents pass away, and
Yeah,
it is a much different thing to uh, speak with other people who have also lost a parent. Um, there's this like kind of weird like fraternity uh,
sure.
in mourning, and when I listened to this album, I had kind of a similar familiarity, um, and a lot of that is knowing what your relationship was like with Maz and everything. Um, so I know that that is like kind of the primary theme of the record is your path in dealing with that. Are there any other things that are present on the album, or is that like the sole focus?
This album's sole focus is my journey through losing Mazer. For those that are watching that might not know me well enough to know Mazer, which would be strange, I guess. Hi, you're new. Um, Mazer was my companion animal. I rescued him in 2009, and he lived with me until the summer of 2019. So almost a decade, just a little short of a decade. And uh, in October of 2018, he was diagnosed with cancer. And that's sort of where the record starts. You can, it's the first track is called Legs Folded Under Methylcrylate Floor. And that kind of flooring is the kind of flooring you see in a vet's office. It's that weird kind of, it looks like it's been glazed or whatever. That was literally just an image that has been in my mind for every day since that time in October. It's that uh, being in a room and having the vet pointing at this X-ray, and the next thing you know, I'm just kind of on the floor because I can't. My legs won't lift me up. I'm down on the floor, and just realizing that we I borrow a lot from other artists in terms of like words. I think everyone's probably noticed that by now. But Iron and Wine had a record called "Our Endless Numbered Days,"
Right,
and I and
right.
I and I that phrase like sticks with me because I I knew he wasn't going to live the same amount of time as I did. I will. I knew that at some point he was going to go. And as the years went by, I knew that time was kind of coming. But at the same time, it's you don't think it's possible. You know, and that was that moment where this thing I knew was going to happen was no longer this like, oh yeah, our days are numbered. It's no, this is finite. This is happening. And um so yeah, that's kind of where the album starts, is with that moment.
I get you. So if I can ask, if that is the beginning, um, is it is it a straight like narrative through, or does it like bounce around like a Tarantino movie, for lack of a better term, or maybe Lost, if that's a cooler reference? Um, so yeah, is it like asynchronous time, or is it kind of like a straight narrative?
It bounces around a little bit because I mean the grief itself bounces around, you know.
Right, right,
Um, and for me, and the way I experience this whole thing, time will kind of bounce around for me. I mean, like I was saying, like I can wake up and I'll be on that floor, you know. I will be there, or I'll be in another moment, you know. I just won't, you know. I'm not really here. I'm already gone, you know. You know, I'm not present, you know, and um, you know, it does bounce around a little bit because of that. That's how I kind of experience it. You know, it's not like it starts with a story and ends with, you know, the story doesn't have an ending. It's the loss is there, and I have to go to go forward if that's my choice, is to go forward with that loss.
right. It's one thing that I think is interesting is, both of us haven't gone through a similar thing. I think we've both learned a very similar lesson over the last few years, as to how important relationships are, like with, I don't want to say similarly minded people, but friendly people, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think of, I think it's interesting that you say, the phrase "lift up" um, a couple times when describing like collaborating with people, um,
Hmm.
be- because you know uh, there's some things, I like to think that I'm a pretty emotionally strong person, but there's just some things you can't carry by yourself.
Yeah.
um, and I wonder if that was the impetus of seeking collaborators for this record, because maybe it uh, you know to use the old cliche, you get by with a little help from your friends, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So was that a conscious thing, or maybe something that just kind of happened because uh, it was a necessity?
It was fairly intentional. I think because of the amount of space I needed to use for my thank you list in the album, I think it just says I could not do this without any of you, or I cannot do anything. But originally it was going to say I could not, cannot, and will not do this without any of you, because um, that was something that I kind of learned through that whole process. Was uh, I wasn't gonna make it through that loss without the people that love me. Um, you know, the people and the, you know, the non-human animals that love me. Um, and so in accepting that, I felt I also could accept other people into the the creation of the album.
Right. It's as somebody else who primarily makes music alone at this point, uh I think I am at this point taking myself more seriously than I ever have, as a musician, and as a composer and artist. Um, and it is probably harder for me to collaborate with people on my own work than it has ever been, because it is so important. So I definitely want to, make sure that, when people hear these additional voices, for lack of a better term, on your record, that they know that this wasn't just like a one-off email, right?
Right, right, yeah.
These are carefully selected and curated people that you brought in for this record, which I think is, a really brilliant thing and pairs really nicely with the theme of the album. So I want to ask you some, I guess, more technical, like recording kind of questions.
Oh
Um,
boy,
yeah,
you're gonna hate these answers.
I am very much like a gear nerd, and I've always suspected that Roman is secretly, but maybe about a very specific lane of gear. You could tell me more about DoD effects pedals than I could tell you about, I don't know, Logic or Pro Tools or anything like that. But I guess I'm curious, did you use any gear that is specific to this record or new to this record, or was it kind of like old standbys, old faithfuls? And you don't have to get into specific pieces if you don't want to. I don't know if there's like an unwritten noise code that it's not okay to ask, but
I'm if anything, I serve to undermine that code with
yeah.
with everything I do by making yeah, just by the way I conduct myself. um, for the album, um, I know for definitely for the first track, there's a few different distortion pedals that I didn't have before this recording. I don't know how to explain the recording process for Plague Mother, because it's kind of like, I don't think I could ever do it in front of anybody. I think if anyone's seen me live the last couple of years, it's, they kind of know I do like weird, my body kind of just sorts of jerks around and stuff, and that's kind of if someone was gonna be like, well, how do you make it sound like that? And it's like, well, it's the distortions and the that part of it is pretty cut and dry, but I think a lot of it has to do with I'm moving my body in very intentional ways, and that kind of produces these sounds that I end up using. Aside from that, I guess for the two tracks that Zach was on, I know that he had a synthesizer that he was using for those tracks, so that would be a huge departure for me, because I don't know how to work them, so I don't use them. But aside from that, like I don't really. You said I could tell you more about a pedal. Like, man, like I don't like. I just turn knobs and twiddle things, and most everything I do is recorded live in a single take, straight into Audacity, and then I edit it down. This album featured a little more production than that. I pieced together one of the tracks from a cassette that I was unhappy with the release of, and I kind of don't acknowledge, and so I reworked both sides into one track that I was much happier with, and I felt fit the record. But yeah, I don't I'm really I'm a caveman when it comes to gear and recording, and I know that that's like a major disappointment for so many people that have listened to me in interviews, and especially in my like podcast interviews, because there's people that just want to talk gear, and I don't fucking, I mean, like, I'll be completely honest, I really don't care what kind of gear you use. I just care about what I hear, and whether or not I can relate to it.
Yeah, I've lately I've been composing a lot more via just computer, uh, and that feels very dirty to me. um, my old bandmate Cody and I, we when we were very young and new to experimental music, we were very anti-computer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when we saw a laptop guy, we were like, because we played instruments, right?
Right.
uh, but I feel like as I'm getting older, a lot of those walls and preconceptions about things are starting to drop, right?
Yeah.
As as long as it sounds good at the end, that's kind of all I care about. So, are there any things like that you've dropped through the process of, uh, being in experimental music for a, a decade now, decade plus?
Um, yeah, I guess I was kind of lucky, like fairly early on with noise. Um, A, to realize that like I was getting the job done with like some pretty primitive processes and equipment, and I was I felt lucky that people would listen to it because I was like, oh, if they only knew, it's just like me and these two shitty pedals and a contact mic, and you know, and maybe they did, and they just didn't care. But um, I guess I was maybe it was 2013, I believe, when I played the End Times Festival in Brooklyn with I mean there were a lot of people, but I was in a car group with David Russell, with Wyatt Howland, who does Skin Graft, and Aaron Dillaway. And when when Francisco Marino played that fest, I couldn't see what he was doing because it's like a dude at a table, you know, and if you're not like right there, you can't see shit. Um, and I was just really feeling what he was doing. It just was powerful and felt really intense. And then he's done, and the crowd kind of opens up, and I see that it was like a laptop and maybe like two or three other things. And my initial reaction was like, oh, laptop. But then I was like, why does it matter? Like, I loved that. You know, if I'd been blind, I would have never had that reaction, you know. And I kind of, you know, I had talked about that in the car ride home, and you know, I had three of the elder statesmen of Ohio noise, and they were kind of, you know, like, yeah, like, you know, just it's the results are what matter, you know, especially with experimental music. That's the beauty of it, you know. We're accomplishing things in unconventional ways, and as long as it's good, it's good.
Um, are there any specific people you pull from on this record, maybe that you haven't before? Because um, you know, I can draw a straight line from David and Wyatt to you sonically. Uh,
Yeah.
and you know, I don't think that's a shameful thing. I'm wearing a Brian Eno shirt right now, and 95% of the songs I record sound like Brian Eno, right? It's what
Right,
happens.
right.
But are there any new people who are, I guess, you know, influential on that level? Uh, you know,
um I mean, I'll always and forever give Wyatt all the credit for most of what I do, just because he always pumped me up, you know. He was always the one telling me that I could do better, you know, without being insulting, you know, be like, "Oh, like, you know, this sounds great. Have you ever thought about doing this?" Um and the same with David. I mean, those two are my brothers, and I can't imagine I don't think I would have continued making experimental music without them, just because they were so encouraging at a time where, especially for someone like me, like I didn't have a lot of confidence in my own work, and they kind of helped me find that confidence. Um, and then I'm just going to keep putting over the same people, uh, you know, with Cremation Lily, with Zen, the direction that he went with his project is so no one's really taken that path so well, in my opinion, and so openly. And I was honored to be a part of one of his EPs that he released in 2020, more songs about drowning. And you know, it was the same record that Wicca Phase, Springs Eternal, and Thursday are on, or Jeff from Thursday, I should say. And you know, just in conversations with Zen over the years about, you know, taking different directions, and being open to those changes, and open to those creative vulnerabilities. You know, it's a risk, you know. And you know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that like I took some grand risks on my record. You know, it very much sounds like a Plague Mother record, but I did feel more open to, you know, again, towards bringing people into the process, towards, you know, letting certain things be there. At the end of the first track, you kind of hear another a band playing, and that band is a band called You and I. It was a band that I was really I've really felt a lot of affinity for over the years. You know, I remember when I was first introduced to them by uh, the guy who really walked me through veganism when I went vegan, and um, you know, the lyrics were really um, like transformative at a time when I was kind of politicizing myself as a hardcore kid, and you know, the song is kind of about trauma and surviving trauma, and I think that they're talking about a specific experience that I don't have any room to speak on. But the line that you hear is at the end of the song. It says, you'll be stronger someday, you'll be taller someday," and I always love that phrase because um, the way they say it, it sounds so sad and kind of almost like, to me, it's them saying it because someone's telling them it and they just don't believe it. And that was very much where I was at, you know, at the beginning of my journey through losing Mazur. Was people saying like, "Oh, you know, you're gonna get through this. You know, you're gonna be okay." And you know, and it's like I don't believe that this. I'm not gonna come out of this better. You know, and I still don't know if I came out of it better or stronger. There's days where I think I just came out of it a little emptier and purposeless. But you know, I have gone on a tangent and I don't really remember where this started. I guess we were talking about being open to things.
Or we're talking about potentially like new influences that came in on this record. I guess I do want to ask, you know, were there any things from like, I guess, more traditional music that you were pulling from, like particular artists, like in hardcore or post-punk, anything like that?
Yeah, that happens a lot with Plague Mother, especially as I usually am listening to something before I record. I tend to like not listen to noise for a little bit just to kind of, you know, as derivative as I can be, attempt some sort of like, you know, you know, creative purity or whatever. You know, I don't want to be like listening to, you know, the Rita for like 4 days straight and then try to record, because then I know I'm just gonna sound like the Rita, and I haven't that problem of attempting to do that enough anyway. Um, so a lot of times I just listen to things that are different, you know. I think probably before 2017 it was a lot of Morrissey all the time. Not so much since he defended Kevin Spacey.
Yeah,
So
that was a tough one.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, before this record came out, I put out a shorter CDR on Small Mercies called Wither and Scatter, and it was kind of about the same experience, but just kind of a different process and a different kind of headspace. And I had made a reference to Me Without You in that record. It's, the glass can only spill what it contains, you know, and you know, I think that particular track and that band has a pretty fascinating position in subculture, punk subculture or whatever. You know, it's being pulled at from so many different ends. You know, they're a Christian band, but you know they don't really want to be a Christian band, and but they kind of do, and you know, you can kind of hear like a little bit of that pulling, I think, in their music. So I definitely was listening to that, to AB Life and Brother Sister, a good bit. Is that album called Brother Sister? Now I'm forgetting.
Yeah, that's
Uh, yeah, I mean, at this point, it was, you know, that's a thing that kind of is a bummer about like the digital age of music, is like you stop, you know, it's like, let me just type the name and then I'm gonna scroll until I find it and then I'm gonna click it and then listen to it. Um, I was also listening to a lot of end of a year / self defense family. I think that that lyricist is unbelievably and sometimes disturbingly honest and pure in his presentation, and I that's what I want in my recordings and my presentation of Plague Mother. Is I want, if you like it or you don't like it, I at least want you to think that it was honest to a fault. And yeah, so like I feel an affinity with that. Um, gosh, um,
So
you know,
if
yeah,
I can interject, one of the influences I've seen you check before that kind of surprised me is Jenny Lewis,
yes,
um,
yes,
because I can definitely see and hear hardcore in your music because
right,
that's part of who we are. Even though we're like older people now, like that's always going to be part of our mindset or whatever.
sure, sure.
But maybe how would an artist like that, like what would you pull from them? Uh, yeah,
It's a weird thing to try to explain. Aside from just the, especially when someone's a singer, um, you can feel and hear the vulnerability in their voices. You know, you can
and she
feel the
is,
honesty. You know,
yeah,
and I think that's the thing that, you know, sometimes I overthink things, and relatively recently I was like, why don't most pop music just goes through me? You know, I don't feel anything, and um, you know, and someone who was mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that I'm not gonna totally put on the spot introduced me to Kesha
oh,
and the album that she recorded after her experience with you know, with coming out as a victim of assault and harassment, and I listened to that record and I was like, wow, I can hear it. You know, I can't hear that in that music, but I think most of the time with pop music, I don't hear it because usually the person who's singing didn't write the lyrics. You
right.
know, they might not even be singing the parts themselves. You know, it's incredibly processed. But like, you know, with like a Jenny Lewis or like with a lot of, you know, like that kind of the big tent of hardcore or punk rather, um, you know, you if maybe it's just economics that keeps most of it from being too overly produced, but you just get that sense of, I don't think she's telling me a story that she didn't live,
Right. Right.
you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's,
Um,
I had never really listened to her until I started dating my now wife. And, I was like, oh, cool, indie, whatever. When she first put it on, and it just blew me away. Like
yeah,
there is like, I feel like that lady has like a hardcore record in her that may come out
yeah,
someday.
totally. Yeah.
I did want to ask a couple, I guess, more specific questions about specific songs on
Yes,
the
definitely.
records. Um,
Yeah.
so the very last track, the name escapes me at the moment. Um, to me, I was, as somebody who's known you, throughout your whole journey as a musician. I am going to call you a musician as much as you may not. uh,
Oh boy.
yeah. So I've always been really interested in seeing you work in very constrained environments. I used to run a show house in Sandusky
Hmm.
called Double Wolf,
Hmm.
and you and I used to kind of go back and forth about how loud you were allowed to play in the house.
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
uh, and some of that was because we lived a block from the police department, but there's no law in Sandusky. It's great. Uh, but I was always so fascinated to see how many different dynamics came out when you played quieter.
Hmm.
And that is the first thing that sprang to mind during that last track. So I guess I'm curious if that was like I'm sure you didn't have me in mind when you did that, but I guess I'm curious. what the impetus was for maybe something a little more pared down, and if it was selected to be the last track after you recorded it, or if you were like, I need a closer and I need this kind of vibe.
That was it. It definitely was like I need to close this album in a specific way, and I want to do it, and I knew what I wanted to use. I just needed to kind of like put it together. Um, you say you had nothing to do with it, but the funny thing is that the piano piece that is looping is from the broken, dusty, dead piano from the Borg Ward in Milwaukee that you made
Ah,
use of. I just happened to be in there one night, and I think it was just me and Jay that were in there. I think we were probably just cleaning up after a show, and I just hit a couple notes, and I was like, oh, I like how that sounds. I'm gonna record it on my phone, and maybe I'll use it someday. And then like 6 years later, I'm like, oh, like I kind of want to end with incorporating that and um, some field recordings that Jackson had provided, and then um, I really wanted to use that sample that I used at the end, which I can explain a little bit more about in a minute. But um, I've used it live a bunch in the last few years, and um, I did actually have it in another track that was just on a comp. Um, but I felt like I could use it a little differently. And yeah, that was fun for me to create because the piano part that I actually recorded is like maybe like 20 seconds or something, and I had to figure out how to loop it without it sounding terrible, and um there's always that weird hesitation um with anything I do. I get like kind of hesitate, like I'm like, man, I might think this is good, but someone's gonna hear this and they're gonna fucking laugh at me. And especially when it's like this isn't even noise. This is me punching a couple keys and adding some atmosphere and um I had that moment where I was like, to me this sounds like a piece for a piano that would fit a noise record, but am I gonna give this to Stefan? He's gonna be like, what the fuck did you hand me? um so yeah, it was intentionally created to close the album out.
cool. What was the sample you were talking about?
So the sample at the end is from a short film that someone I used to know was a member of the cast. It's called Sleep Cure, and it's kind of a sci-fi piece, but that moment is between um, a test subject and the woman conducting the study, and I just felt like what he was saying kind of fit being recontextualized. He was saying, I'm just so tired of myself, but I can't sleep it off. That's very much how I have felt through this journey of grief in different ways. And then there's that pregnant pause, and she asks, "Are you okay?" And she says it so defeated because she knows that she knows the answer is no. Um, I felt like that was a good way to end the record, and yeah, the whole idea of being tired of yourself, and not being able to sleep it off is one of the hardest parts of the time between the diagnosis and when he passed was um learning to accept that I couldn't do anything about it. Nothing, no amount of money. I'm gonna quote two more bands because they really fit. Propaganda has a really good song where it says like, no amount of money, drugs, or tears would keep you here. um and that was true. It's like I could have had $1 billion and I wasn't gonna save him. I could have I could have done anything and it wasn't gonna stop this. I couldn't I couldn't stop it. And the band Brand New, which I know has a bit of a tainted reputation now, but they had a track on their second record, and there's a line that says, um, "If I could, I'd shrink myself." I'm gonna misquote it because I can't even think of it unless I'm hearing the song, you know. But it says like, "If I could, I'd shrink myself and pass through to your blood cells and remove whatever made you hurt, but I'm too weak to be your cure." You know, I struggled with the reality that I couldn't take this away from him. You know, there's nothing, you know, I had kind of, since I was, since I left my living with my mom and being, you know, under the kind of influence and coercion of her faith, I had kind of been pretty strongly and reactionary about my atheism. You know, it was kind of a pretty angry atheism, you know, to be truthful about it. And my time with Mazda really weakened it really fast because there's just some things I couldn't explain. You know, I don't. I'm not. You know, I don't. I'm certainly not a monotheist, and I don't really believe in God or anything like that per se. I don't really have a cosmology aside from I think that humans are meant to have extremely special connections with animals and with this planet, and that a large part of what makes us unhappy now is that we do not have those relationships, and that our culture actively works to prevent us from having those relationships. So, in developing that relationship with Mazur and realizing that, um, that he's, you know, I'm not just this human that feeds him, and he's not this, you know, this dog that stares at me all day. You know, he was my soulmate. You know, he really was. He was a reflection of the best parts of me, the best that I could do. You know, and when you go from, I'm kind of all over the place. I apologize, but
That's okay.
when you go from from being raised in what is essentially a cult, um, to just being on your own, the guilt is heavy,
Yeah.
through my whole life, especially when I was a teenager, especially in my early 20s. The amount of guilt that I felt for not, um, for not agreeing to their context, you know. Um, Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, you know, I think the first time I met Maz was the first noise show we played together at the Tower back in the day in Cleveland. Um,
Oh yeah, I think I brought him by real quick to say hello to everyone, and
yeah,
then yeah, I
yeah,
did not
and
bring him into this show.
oh no, absolutely not. No, no, no. Yeah, we were like hanging out outside, uh, and it is, you know, having known you for such a long time, uh, you know, my read on the situation was that you had this tough relationship with your mom.
Yeah,
Putting it lightly. You know, I'm
yeah,
not trying to put your
right.
it's not my place to put your information out there.
No,
But
no, it's. I mean, that's what this interview is for.
yeah,
So
but you know, I saw Moz as a conduit to kind of repair your relationship with relationships.
yes,
Um, and you know, I think that it is incredibly fitting that this record that is in tribute to him is one of the first that you've heavily collaborated on.
no,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that pairs really nicely. And I don't know if that was an intentional thing, but that was, you know, when I got to the end of the record, that is one thing that jumped out to me.
Yeah.
The other thing is it's just it shows an immense amount of growth uh, conceptually and also in the sound. Uh,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, of course. One thing I do want to, I guess, talk about on a more technical level
Can,
is.
I just wanted to finish I'm sorry. I felt
Oh,
like
I'm
I'm
so sorry.
interrupting you. You're
No,
the
no, no.
interviewer. Um, the thing about guilt that I was explaining was if you feel this massive guilt and you feel like you're a bad person. And I felt that for a long time. I felt that in every relationship that I had with a person that I was supposed to be their partner and their lover. I felt like I was a bad person because I wasn't, if I wasn't directly thinking that, it was in the back of my mind somewhere in my subconscious that I was a bad person because, I was out of wedlock and, whatever else you want to say about it. So, for me to have Mazer and have him be a reflection of the best of me and proof that I can be a good person was huge. It was absolutely huge. Um and in that and the process of losing that was there were moments when I had to think about what else I was going to lose, and I was very afraid that that was what I was going to lose too. I was going to lose uh the belief that I can be a good person, the belief that I can contribute in a beautiful way to the world versus, so much of my life is uh retaliatory, really. I mean, I position myself politically in a pretty confrontational manner, and my lifestyle choices are pretty confrontational. It's all kind of built off like a negative thing that I can spin positively, and as I get older I find ways to look at more positively, but being Mazer's human and seeing him thrive and be happy and be this being that touched lots of lives, strangers and friends and family, you know that that was that was important to me, and I was very scared that I was going to lose that.
Yeah, one thing I do want to say, and this is Matt, your friend, and not Matt, the interviewer,
Okay.
speaking right now. But I went through a very similar thing, mindset with when my mom passed, thinking about like, oh, all this stuff is gone now, and like, I'm a pretty despite doing this interview online, I'm a pretty antisocial person. And she was always very good about getting me to be more social and more open and things like that. Um, and I think the thing that I've learned from it, and I think the thing that is very apparent to me, especially coming out in this record with, you know, talking about doing all these collaborations on the record and stuff, is that, you know, we talked about how he repaired your relationship with relationships. Uh, and this album is like a very strong document of that, of like everything that he helped to teach you.
Hmm.
And um the fact that it was carried on in his absence in tribute to him is evidence to me that uh it's not gone. Now I know he's not with you, but that the good parts that he brought out in you are with you. It's very clearly evident on this record to me. So
Oh,
I just wanted to say that. And
oh, thank you.
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you. Yeah.
absolutely. So I did want to ask a technical question.
Okay.
And I would drive myself nuts if I didn't ask this. So there seems to be a lot of attention paid to stereo field on this record in a way that is perhaps uncommon to harsh noise,
Mm.
right? So I would hear a lot of, okay, there is one massive sound on my left side and a different massive sound on my right side, generally at different pitches, especially kind of in the middle part of the record where there's a lot more noise wall kind of tracks, as opposed to kind of the outer edges of the record. Was that like an intentional choice? Was it meant to convey anything? Because I can tell you what it
Um,
what it read like to me, is obviously, when I first heard it, I was like, all right, that's my friend. He's figuring it out. But it also pairs with the idea of like you and your walk with the grief being like maybe grief being a separate entity along with
yeah,
you.
yeah.
And
Um,
that was my interpretation. I don't know if that was what you were meaning to convey, but
well, I will take credit for some of it, that I was intentionally trying to kind of have a little bit of a. I wanted things to feel pulled, you know.
yeah.
I wanted you to kind of not be sure where to focus, because that was kind of another aspect of the grieving process, was I wasn't really sure what to do. I wasn't sure which direction to go. But a lot of that was brought out considerably by Grant Richardson of Nod, who mastered the record. I cannot thank him enough for again, because so much of it was kind of pieced together. There were a lot of different volume levels to deal with, and so I knew I needed it to get it mastered. And um, Grant was kind of my only choice, because I think most people on Harsh Noise would tell you, like, he's the guy to go to if you're going to go to someone. And Mazur loved Grant, especially when he had his dreads. He just had some fascination with those fucking things, and he would love when Grant would stay over. So I knew he also had that connection, and I trusted him, and whether he meant to or not, I think he, much like the others, just kind of brought out on, helped me realize that record more fully. So yeah.
Yeah, mastering it's a really tricky thing, because it's an immense amount of trust you're placing in somebody. So like I honestly, like, I have the person who I consider one of my two very best friends master all my records, because
Right.
I'm an insane person and I don't trust anybody else to do it.
Right.
Yeah. But so let's see. One other thing I did want to talk about, other outside of the record and everything. Um, how do you see your presentation changing, perhaps in a live realm, after a year of not playing? Because this has to have been the longest span you've gone without playing a show in how many years?
Since 2009.
Jeez.
So
Yeah.
11 years. This was the first year where I didn't, I haven't played a show. Towards the At one point in time, I had said that I wasn't going to do Plague Mother live anymore, just because of the space that it kind of takes me into mentally. It's really hard to snap out of right away. And, you're at a show, with friends, like, you don't want to be fucking sad.
Right.
But I had some conversations with my friend Dean, who does Knifed Out of Existence, when we went on a little 3-day tour. It was our tour, and the Rita and Black Letter Jesus's tour were like the last Noise tours on Earth. And we'd had some conversations kind of about how we channel that energy, like, when we perform. And I walked away from that feeling like I wanted to play more shows as Plague Mother again. I don't really know where I stand with it in the moment, because right now I feel like when things come back, I just kind of want to have fun for a while. And
Yeah.
my project Slit Throats is where I have fun. But I'm definitely not done playing it live. I have dreams and goals to accomplish with it. But yeah, it's going to be daunting to get to just in general go back to. It's going to be difficult to go back in the dingy basements where this shit probably started.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Yeah.
or perhaps where I became, you know, immune to anything that they could throw my way. It's like I was like, I've been in some terrible basements. I could probably live past a lot of
Oh,
different
yeah.
viruses.
I have said many times, like, I think growing up in punk and then transitioning into noise, uh, I feel pretty well prepared to fight off any infectious disease.
Yeah.
Um, oh, yeah,
It's like if you've been in the basement of Now That's Class, or you've been to the Cool Ranch, then you can survive anything.
right. Um, so I can say, from my personal experience, I took like 2 to 3 years off when I was in grad
Yeah.
school. And I didn't play. I mean, like I'd fart around at home every once in a while, but that was it. And coming back to it uh, was such an education
Hmm.
because, like, it's something I had done since I was 16 was play shows. And then taking that time off and coming back, I was like, oh, I'm really bad at this all of a sudden. uh, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting really anxious again. That sucks. I thought I was over this. But getting to a point where I was like really comfortable playing live again, it had become such a rewarding thing. And I think everybody's going to be going through that together for people
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
are going to be playing live coming up soon. So I think we're up for like a really interesting batch of shows, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I did want to ask, when you do play as Plague Mother again, are you going to attempt to play some of the stuff from this record, or are you going to do more kind of like in the moment, kind of improv stuff? Um,
Yeah. I don't think I could ever. The only way I'm able to recreate the like more like atmospheric ambient stuff live is because it's loaded into a sampler on my phone, and it's a matter of pushing a couple buttons. I don't If I had to like figure out what knobs I twiddled to get that sound off of a refrigerator or whatever, and then I wouldn't be able to do it.
yeah, I
You
can
know,
tell
like
you. I was going to say I can tell you as the ambient guy in the room that's what a lot of ambient guys are doing, anyways.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, like I don't I don't know, because like I feel like I would like to somehow tour on this record. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a weird concept as a noise artist. It's something that you wouldn't think twice about if you were in a hardcore band or whatever. It's like, oh, we put this record out, now we go play those songs. Um, I'm not entirely sure how I'd like to present it, but I do think I would like to, in some way, shape, or form, present parts of this record, at least in some setting.
Yeah, I think I would be really interested to see, because I know how intensive a performer you are, um, and this is likely your most personal material. Uh, the part of me that is interested in you as an artist would very much like to see that. The part of me that is your friend uh, might be a little bit hesitant to be like, oh yeah, you should definitely do that, because
Right.
I know how hard you throw yourself into things like that. Uh, but again, as your friend, I know it might be something that you need to do, um, just to kind of get it out. So, um, well, we've gone about an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh wow. Okay.
Uh, you can tell we haven't seen each other in a year, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess I'm curious if there's like any things we didn't touch on that you want to talk about, or anything you want to shout from the noise mountaintops, to borrow a phrase from Tim Held.
Right. Um, well, obviously, if you're watching this, this is a recording, but we will be doing a live Q&A right after this. So stick around for that. If you have any questions, or you just want to troll me in the Twitch chat, that's fine. This album is me pouring myself out. I have nothing left to show you. I don't really know how else to put it. I do really genuinely feel, if you listen to this record and you feel like you haven't seen or felt the nature of Plague Mother or me, I don't know what else to do. I can't do any differently. I don't want to do any differently, I guess. But there's a lot of reasons that this record is really important, and why I'm trying to get it into so many people's hands, why we're doing a live stream to promote it. For one, Stefan takes a risk anytime he puts anything of mine out, because I can be a hard pill to swallow for some people, and I understand that, and I appreciate Stefan taking that risk every time. So I would love for this to just do really well, so that he feels like his risk has been rewarded. And more importantly to me is that this is really the culmination of everything that I could imagine creating with Plague Mother, and it's a sonic document of the most important time in my life, and I want like you said, like, I guess I just want to shout it from the mountaintops. I don't want people to know my pain, I don't want that, but I do want people to know that pain existed, and that I guess what I really want is for this is going to sound a little silly, but what I would like is for so many people to listen to it that wherever he is, Mazur can hear it and know that, and just to know, I struggle with the thought that from the moment he passed going forward, undoubtedly there will be people that come into my life that aren't here now, and they will not have known him.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with the reality that, like, there's 7 billion people on this planet, and so many of that 7 billion never got to experience such a beautiful creature and such a beautiful being, and so this album is, it's like I said at the bottom of the credits on the inside, it's you are everything, use everything, and I want people to feel that, I guess.
The thing that even if I didn't know you, if I listened to this record, the thing that would come across to me is that it was profoundly important to you to record it, but also that you are being 100% honest, which it's very easy to be cynical, especially now because everything is backwards and upside down. But to be honest about loving someone or loving something is that is, in my mind, the highest thing that art can achieve, is to say, like, this is a person that I cared more about than anything. Um, and I definitely think that's something you have achieved with this record. So I'm incredibly proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, man. And I hope that your future releases are maybe not as taxing emotionally, but you keep that core of, honesty coming through, because as a person who doesn't regularly listen to a ton of harsh noise anymore, um, this felt like something very different to me. It's very hokey to use the term transcendent, but I can't think of a better word to describe what's going on. I think it's transcendent in your catalog, and I think it's transcendent for the genre.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's what the great records in any genre do. So yeah, I think that's about all I've got.
Thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time to ask me some questions and above and beyond all that, just to listen to the record and to experience it, and even above and beyond that, for the years of friendship, and especially for those last 4 years. I think we say it maybe once a year to each other, but without you and Mike, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I look forward to that every day of my life. I look forward to the minute I get this notification from one of you about some ridiculous happening in wrestling, or some giant plate of food that we should not be eating, but we are most definitely going to be eating. And, like I wouldn't, like I said in the credits of the record, like I couldn't do this without you. I cannot do this without you. And quite frankly, I won't do it without you.
Yeah, absolutely the same. I think, we have talked about the idea of, I think I said about 2 weeks ago, I don't think it's coincidental that that the three of us talk every day, and that we're not trying to sound arrogant, but we're all making the best work we've ever made right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's very cool. And that is, a big reason why I wanted to do this, is because, not to be selfish, but I didn't really feel like it was anybody else's place other than maybe Stefan. But yeah, he probably has more of a life than I do. So,
well, he's a professor, so
fair enough.
He's a little busy. Yeah, it was kind of funny that at first when I saw the notification, I think you said it all in one text, but I think I just looked at it really quick and I was like, Matt wants to interview me. That's weird. And then I looked at the rest of it, and it's like, I've been there since the beginning. I've been there since your first show. I was like, oh yeah, he really has. And he probably is the best person to ask me questions about something that's so, this isn't like, if we were doing Slit Throats, well, for one, it would just be more like a pro wrestling shoot interview. But anybody could do it. I can talk shit with anybody, but you are a person who has experienced me as a whole person, and not just this one part of me, and that's, I appreciate that you were so thoughtful to even offer to do it. And for everyone who's stuck with us, Matt's project Sacred Canopy is available to stream on Spotify, much like Plague Mother. And I think we still have some exciting news to come regarding Sacred Canopy and Plague Mother, so stay tuned to that. And yeah.
All right, man. Well, this has been a real delight. I'm gonna go eat some more cake.
Sounds good.